I always tell you that there is no specific macronutrient that is to blame for all diseases, all the ills of humanity, or simply the obesity epidemic, as sometimes people want to make you believe. However, it is true that there are many people trapped in an unhealthy consumption of carbohydrates. A consumption that is either excessive or simply a poor choice of carbohydrate-rich foods. That is, eating unhealthy carbohydrates, whether your problem is the first or the second thing we just mentioned. That is, you tend to abuse carbohydrates, or you make a poor choice in the type of carbohydrate-rich food, or both, which is usually what happens. Both things tend to occur together. There are people who consume carbohydrates excessively, and also the choice of carbohydrate-rich foods is poor. In fact, the second usually conditions the first A. Poor choice of carbohydrates usually conditions a excessive consumption of them, an abuse of carbohydrates. So, whether you want to decrease your body fat percentage because you have this love relationship with some foods, or not recommended, or for some other reason related to your health, you may find yourself wanting to decrease the amount of carbohydrates you consume daily. What is the most efficient way to do it? Because you might believe that most of the carbohydrates you consume in your diet are in the potato, or are in the rice you take as drink has more than 30 grams of sugar. This is not new, but there are many people who seem to still not realize this fact. An iced tea or a cold tea with added sugar, or the typical breakfast or mid-morning shakes that we drink, the juices, whether they are natural or industrial, it doesn't matter, or also the famous and healthy smoothies loaded with fruit. A smoothie can be suitable in some contexts, and a smoothie can have more or less carbohydrates. You can make a smoothie based on vegetables and with a little bit of fruit, but there are also smoothies with 5 different pieces of fruit, and this also provides sugar, which are carbohydrates. I'll give you an example. Look, 100 grams of boiled or roasted potato have between 15 and 20 grams of carbohydrates, okay? 100 grams of potato, 15 to 20 grams of carbohydrates, depending on the potato. If a person takes a very nice, colorful smoothie in the morning with 4 different pieces of fruit, something that is quite common in many people, at midday with the meal takes a sugary drink, for dinner takes a natural juice to accompany the dinner, then they have easily put in more than 80 grams of sugar and therefore carbohydrates. Each gram of carbs has 4 calories. Multiply 80 by 4, then we have 320 calories. Look, if this person only and without changing anything else in their day-to-day, in their lifestyle, if this person drank water instead of everything I just mentioned, the smoothie, the soda, the juice, well, they would already be losing fat at a considerable rate, and I repeat, without making any other change in what they eat. To show you how we add sugar and carbohydrates to our day-to-day without sometimes realizing it. Second point, very important, second advice, decrease the consumption of bread. If there is a food that we abuse as a population, without a doubt this is bread, but not just any bread. We abuse especially white bread, bread made with refined flours. White bread is not the devil. It can have a role in certain contexts once again, but it is a bit problematic food for many people. It is a food with an almost addictive potential for many people. And ultimately, the consequence of this is that there are many people abusing bread without realizing it. In addition, it is consumed in a pattern of unhealthy eating. Often, it is an unconscious consumption of bread. When we are bored, we grab a piece of bread and we eat it simply, unconsciously. We pass through the kitchen, we grab the appetizing loaf of bread, and we eat a chunk, and that repeatedly throughout the day. Well, it's a considerable consumption. There are many people who only eat with bread, who have lunch and dinner with bread. And when the piece of bread they have is finished, they grab another one because they have the loaf available there on the table. What happens? Well, this adds up many grams of carbohydrates at the end of the day, and at the end of the week, and at the end of the month. What can you do? Well, you can do several things. The hardest thing would be to stop eating white bread. Eliminate white bread consumption. It's not a food that we need, let alone a healthy source of carbohydrates. There are much more interesting sources. Some people claim that white bread has fiber. Yes, It has 2 grams of fiber for every 100 grams. It's not a lot of fiber. Most of the fiber you take in should come from vegetables, greens, and fruits. You can introduce, modify, change the white bread for a bread of higher quality, more interesting, like a spelt wholemeal bread, for example, or a wheat or buckwheat bread, or a flax bread, or a rye bread. They are less appetizing varieties, less palatable, less good. We like them less, but they are healthier. So you can make this change. Or you can negotiate with yourself and consume bread only in 1 meal a day, at lunch or dinner, or at breakfast, but not in 3 meals a day. Or maybe you can limit the amount of bread on the table, that is, put 30-40 grams next to your plate. When they're gone, they're gone. We're not going to get another piece of bread. Choose the option that suits you best, that is most convenient for you, but try to reduce bread consumption. You'll realize that you'll be drastically reducing carbohydrate intake. Third point, also very important, if you're going to snack, choose low-carb snacks. What do you think we mostly snack on in between meals? Well, no, we don't snack on fruit, nor nuts, nor protein shakes in between meals. What we usually snack on in between meals are bagged potato chips, sandwich bread, sugary yogurts, some ice cream, chocolate with sugar. These are the typical snacks we eat when we're bored in the afternoon, watching something on TV, or at night after dinner. It's what we usually eat. What's happening? Well, the consequence is that we end up adding more and more grams of sugar and carbohydrates to our diet without realizing it. And the problem is this, without realizing it, okay? And unconsciously. What can you do when hunger strikes? Well, here are some snacks with less than 5 grams of carbohydrates. Net per 30 gram serving. I'm talking about almonds, peanuts, macadamia nuts, pecans, hazelnuts, even cheese or homemade protein bars, or why not, a protein shake. I recommend you have a protein shake, 200 milliliters of protein shake instead of grabbing a juice or any bag of potato chips. You can also have some fruit, but not in juice form, whole fruit. The fourth point would be to add eggs to your breakfast. You see, breakfast is peculiar. It's the most peculiar meal, I would say, of the day for many reasons. It's the only meal where we have food specifically designed for breakfast. For example, breakfast cereals, or juices, or white bread toast with stuff. That is, there are foods that seem to be culturally designed for breakfast, when this doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Another oddity is that breakfast often has the least protein of all daily meals. And it has been shown, it's proven, more than proven, that adding protein to breakfast keeps you much more satiated throughout the day. Thus, your food choices will improve. Because when we are hungry, we eat unconsciously and choose worse things to eat. So if you put protein in your breakfast, you're going to feel more satisfied, make better food decisions, more long-term fat loss. What's happening? Many people don't want to eat steak or sardines for breakfast, despite them being good sources of protein. So, for me, one of the most suitable and protein-rich foods for breakfast are eggs. Eggs are high in protein, have minimal carbohydrates, and are delicious. They taste great and can be prepared in various ways. They are versatile in the kitchen and pair very well with vegetables or some quality bread. That is, they are not boring. Therefore, adding a couple of eggs for breakfast, well, it's a good idea. Add a couple of eggs to your breakfast. And the last and fifth recommendation I give you to consciously reduce your daily carbohydrate intake would be to change your side dish. I have already said that the main problem here is not the side dish. It's not even the rice or potato you're having. Unless you're a potato lover, and eating 3 kilos of potatoes daily is not normal. The problem tends to be liquid calories, the liquid carbohydrates we consume. On one hand, beer, which is also a good source of carbohydrates, and I haven't mentioned it, or what I've said, or say carbohydrate-rich snacks, or bread, which is also a problematic food, as we've discussed. However, if you want to reduce your carbohydrate intake, you can indeed make some adjustments to your garnish. When you eat at home, but also when you eat out, you can swap out starches, potatoes, sweet potato, rice, anything that's starchy for vegetables that grow above the ground. I've explained this rule many times in the videos. It's not infallible, but it turns out that most vegetables that grow above the ground have a fairly acceptable amount of carbohydrates, while many of those that grow below are richer in carbohydrates. It's a simple rule to remember. Simply changing the starches in your side dish for vegetables that grow above the ground will be reducing carbohydrate intake without much extra effort. And you'll also have the added advantage that you're increasing the consumption of vegetables, fiber, micronutrients. And then, just as we've mentioned that bread is problematic for this reason, there are also especially problematic side dishes. In my country, for example, in Spain, and especially in the young population, in children above all, there are the fried potatoes. Fried potatoes are a problem. There are children, and there are also adults who only take fried potatoes as a garnish. And obviously we are adding not only carbohydrates, but also many calories in the form of a food that is not very interesting nutritionally, so that some side dishes are riskier than others. If we have to choose between a boiled potato with a little oil and salt or French fries, well, obviously I prefer the boiled potato. These wouldn't be the only tips, guys. We could delve into the world of low-carb flours, low-carb desserts, and many more tips to reduce or moderate carbohydrate consumption without suffering too much. If you want us to see it in another video, then leave it in the comments. I will be aware. I read all the comments. I can't answer them all. I wish I could answer all of you, but I do read them. I am aware, and I will make another video if you are interested. A big hug. See you next time and stay empowered. Thank you.